Rain tapped steadily against the kitchen windows while Marie James stood over a pot of chicken stew, stirring it slowly after another 12-hour shift at one of Charlotte's busiest hospitals. The smell of onions, garlic, and fresh herbs filled the house. Upstairs, her 14-year-old daughter Jessica reviewed chemistry notes with soft music playing through her bedroom door. The television murmured quietly in the living room, ignored by everyone. It looked like another ordinary Thursday. Grant Wilson walked through the front door a few minutes later, loosened his tie, and placed his leather briefcase beside the stairs. He looked tired, but not unusually so. He smiled when Marie glanced over her shoulder. "Long day?" she asked. "You could say that." She smiled back. "Dinner's almost ready." Grant stepped into the kitchen, kissed her forehead, poured himself a glass of water, and leaned against the island. For several minutes, they talked the way they always did after work. Jessica's birthday was only a few weeks away. One of Grant's commercial real estate projects had been delayed. Marie mentioned a nurse she planned to recommend for a leadership position. Nothing felt unusual. Nothing warned her that the next few minutes would divide her life into two completely different chapters. Grant slowly set his glass on the countertop. "There's something I need to talk to you about." Marie kept stirring the stew. "What is it?" He hesitated for only a moment. "You remember Chloe?" Marie nodded. "My ex?" "Yes." "What about her?" "She moved back to Charlotte several months ago." Marie stopped stirring for the first time. "I didn't know that. I didn't think it mattered." She turned toward him. "You've been talking to her?" Grant nodded once. "Here and there." "For how long?" "A few months." Marie looked at him carefully. "You never mentioned it." "I honestly didn't think it was important." She held his eyes for several seconds before asking quietly, "So why are you telling me now?" Grant inhaled slowly. "Because she asked me for something." Marie waited. Her engagement ended. Still she waited. "She says she never found closure after we broke up." Marie folded the kitchen towel beside the stove. "And?" Grant spoke so calmly that, for a second, she wondered whether she had misunderstood what he was about to say. "She asked if I'd spend one night with her." Silence settled over the kitchen. The rain outside suddenly became the only sound either of them heard. Marie blinked once. "I'm sorry. What did you just say?" "Just one night." She stared at him. "I don't think I heard you correctly." Grant remained surprisingly composed. "She believes that if we spend one last night together, she'll finally be able to move on with her life." Marie searched his face, waiting for him to laugh, waiting for him to admit this was some terrible joke. He didn't. Instead, he continued speaking as though he were presenting a reasonable solution to an ordinary problem. "I've thought about it a lot." "You've thought about it?" "Yes." Marie felt her heartbeat slow instead of quicken. "You've seriously considered sleeping with another woman?" Grant immediately shook his head. "You're making it sound worse than it is." Her voice stayed remarkably steady. "Worse than what?" "It's not about starting another relationship." "Then what is it about?" "It's closure." "For who?" "For her." Marie looked at the man she had shared a home with for 12 years. The confidence in his voice unsettled her more than the request itself. He wasn't speaking like someone afraid of losing his wife. He sounded like someone explaining why she should already agree. Grant leaned forward. "I wanted to be honest instead of hiding it." Marie nodded slowly. "You expect me to appreciate that?" "No." "Then tell me exactly what you expected." "I hoped you'd understand." She studied him for another long moment. Then she asked one question. "If a man I loved before I met you called tomorrow and asked me to spend one night with him for closure." She paused. "Would you tell me to go?" Grant's expression changed immediately. His confidence disappeared. His eyes shifted toward the floor. Several seconds passed. He never answered. Marie didn't repeat the question. She didn't need to. His silence answered it more clearly than words ever could. For the first time that evening, she understood the real problem. Grant knew the request was wrong. He simply believed the rules were different when they benefited him. Without another word, Marie turned back toward the stove. She picked up the wooden spoon. She gently stirred the stew again, watching the vegetables circle through the simmering broth. She wasn't trying to finish dinner. She was trying to understand how the man standing a few feet away had become someone she no longer recognized. Welcome back to James Experience Stories. If this is your first time here, you're welcome. Stick around and consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow and allows more people to hear stories like this. Charlotte, North Carolina, had been home to Marie James and Grant Wilson for almost 12 years. It wasn't the city either of them grew up in, but it was the place where they had built nearly everything that mattered. Their first apartment had been less than 10 minutes from downtown, with thin walls, worn carpet, and a tiny kitchen barely large enough for two people to stand comfortably together. Back then, they talked constantly about what their future might become. Every paycheck was carefully planned. Every promotion felt like another step toward the life they dreamed of building. Now that dream appeared complete. Their home stood on a quiet residential street, lined with mature oak trees and sidewalks where neighbors still greeted one another by name. Children rode bicycles after school. Families gathered for weekend cookouts during the summer holiday. Decorations appeared on nearly every porch each December, turning the neighborhood into the kind of place people rarely wanted to leave. The Wilson family blended into that picture so naturally that few people questioned whether anything could ever disturb it. On Sunday mornings, Marie and Grant usually arrived together at church, Jessica walking between them with a smile that reflected both parents. During neighborhood gatherings, Grant carried folding chairs while Marie helped organize food tables before anyone asked. If someone moved into the neighborhood, they were often among the first to welcome the new family with homemade cookies or an invitation to dinner. People admired them without reservation. They figured marriage out. They're a great team. I hope my kids end up with a relationship like theirs. Marie always smiled politely when she heard comments like those. Grant usually laughed and thanked people before changing the subject. Neither of them corrected anyone. The truth wasn't that their marriage was fake. The truth was much quieter. Over the years, routine had slowly replaced appreciation. Every weekday began before sunrise. Marie rarely needed an alarm because years of hospital work had trained her body to wake before dawn. By 5:30 each morning, she was already downstairs in the kitchen preparing breakfast, while the rest of the house remained silent. Coffee brewed. Lunches were packed. Jessica's school uniform waited neatly folded on the dining chair. Permission slips, homework assignments, and soccer schedules were stacked in organized folders beside Jessica's backpack. Marie checked the family calendar taped inside one of the pantry doors. A dentist appointment next Tuesday. Jessica's science competition next Friday. Grant's parents visiting in 2 weeks. The annual hospital accreditation meeting later that month. Nothing escaped her attention. She wasn't naturally organized because she enjoyed making lists. She stayed organized because too many people depended on her. Grant usually came downstairs around 6:30, freshly showered and already dressed for work. "Morning," he would say while reaching for his coffee. "Morning," Marie answered, with the same warm smile she had given him for years. Jessica appeared a few minutes later, often still rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Mom, did you sign my permission form?" "It's already inside your backpack." "My soccer jersey?" "Washed yesterday. It's hanging in the laundry room." "My calculator?" "Front pocket of your school bag." Jessica laughed. "I don't know how you remember everything." Marie simply smiled. "I've had practice." Grant often shook his head with amused admiration. "I honestly don't know how she keeps this family running." Jessica usually agreed. Neither of them noticed that the sentence had become less of a compliment and more of an expectation. Breakfast ended. Grant headed toward his office across town. Jessica left for school. Marie drove toward one of Charlotte's largest hospitals, where another full day already waited. The pace inside the hospital rarely slowed. Phones rang constantly. Emergency cases arrived without warning. Staff shortages demanded immediate solutions. Departments competed for limited resources. Patients expected answers. Families needed reassurance. Marie moved through each hallway with steady confidence earned through years of experience. She greeted security officers by name before asking about their children. She thanked housekeeping staff whenever she passed them. She stopped beside nurses' stations long enough to ask whether anyone needed additional support before continuing toward administrative meetings. People respected her because she never acted as though any job mattered more than another. When a cafeteria employee struggled after losing a family member, Marie quietly arranged schedule adjustments without making the employee feel guilty. When a new nurse became overwhelmed during her first difficult week, Marie stayed after work, helping her navigate hospital procedures until confidence replaced fear. When patients waited longer than expected for treatment, Marie personally reviewed the delays instead of assigning blame. Leadership, in her mind, wasn't measured by authority. It was measured by responsibility. The same attitude followed her home every evening. By the time Marie returned from work, dinner ingredients were already waiting because she had planned meals days earlier. Laundry moved through regular cycles without anyone reminding her. Household bills were paid before deadlines arrived. Jessica's school emails had already been answered. Birthday cards reached relatives on time. Holiday plans somehow came together every year without anyone asking how they had been organized. The work remained invisible because it happened before anyone realized it needed doing. Grant appreciated the results. He rarely noticed the effort. His own career had flourished during those same years. As a regional commercial real estate consultant, he traveled throughout North Carolina and neighboring states helping companies secure office buildings, retail properties, and investment opportunities. Clients liked him immediately. He listened more than he talked. He negotiated confidently without becoming aggressive. He remembered names. He returned phone calls. People trusted him because he appeared dependable. The promotions arrived steadily. Bonuses became larger. Professional awards filled shelves inside his office. Whenever coworkers congratulated him, Grant accepted the praise modestly. "You've really built something," one colleague said during an annual company banquet. "I've been fortunate," Grant replied. He believed that answer. He rarely considered everything happening at home that allowed him to accept business dinners, overnight travel, and last-minute meetings without worrying about the countless responsibilities waiting elsewhere. If Jessica became sick during school hours, Marie adjusted her schedule. If Grant's parents needed transportation to medical appointments while visiting Charlotte, Marie handled it. If the water heater failed, she called contractors before Grant even learned there had been a problem. If tax documents required organizing, she completed everything weeks before deadlines. Grant enjoyed freedom because someone else quietly protected it. Neither of them discussed that reality. After years of living that way, it simply became normal. Friday evenings remained their favorite family tradition. No matter how demanding the week became, they ordered pizza from the same neighborhood restaurant Jessica had loved since elementary school. Board games covered the dining table. Sometimes Jessica won. Sometimes Grant celebrated far too enthusiastically after winning. Marie laughed at both of them. Later, they watched a movie together in the living room. Occasionally, Grant stepped away to answer a work call. Sometimes Marie checked messages from the hospital, but they always returned. Jessica believed those evenings proved her family would stay exactly as it was forever. Children often mistake routine for permanence. Adults sometimes do the same. Marie looked around the living room one Friday night while Jessica argued that her father had cheated during a board game. Grant laughed harder than anyone. Jessica threw a pillow at him. Marie smiled while gathering empty pizza boxes from the coffee table. For a brief moment, she paused. She watched her husband laughing with their daughter. She listened to the familiar sounds filling the house. She felt grateful. She believed she had built a life worth protecting. She had no idea that the foundation beneath that life had already begun to weaken. Grant didn't recognize it either. The difference was that one of them was still carrying the marriage every single day. The other had quietly begun assuming it would continue standing, no matter how little he contributed to holding it together. By the beginning of their 12th year of marriage, nothing dramatic had changed. That was exactly why Marie never suspected anything. There was no sudden argument, no unexplained disappearance, no shocking confession. Life simply became a little different, one ordinary day after another. Grant's business trips started lasting an extra night every few weeks. He explained that several commercial developments across the Carolinas required more face-to-face meetings with investors. His explanation made sense. The commercial real estate market had become increasingly competitive, and Marie knew his company had expanded into several new regions. She believed him because she had never been given a reason not to. One Monday evening, Grant arrived home almost an hour later than usual. Jessica looked up from the dining table where she was finishing algebra homework. "Dad, you're late." Grant smiled as he loosened his tie. Traffic was terrible. Marie placed another serving of pasta onto his plate. "You must be exhausted." "I am." He kissed Jessica's forehead before sitting down. The conversation shifted naturally towards school, work, and weekend plans. Nothing about the evening felt unusual, except for one small detail. Grant checked his phone several times during dinner. He never used to do that. Whenever the screen lit up, he glanced at it almost immediately before turning the phone face down again. Marie noticed. She also dismissed it. Work had become busier for both of them. She refused to become the kind of spouse who questioned every message arriving after business hours. Trust required choosing trust. That was what she believed. A few weeks later, another change quietly appeared. Grant started buying new clothes more often. Not expensive designer suits, just better fitted shirts, new leather shoes, a different watch. One evening, Marie smiled while helping him hang a navy blue jacket inside the closet. "This one's nice." Grant looked over. "My clients are paying closer attention these days." She nodded. "Looking professional never hurts." He smiled. "Exactly." She accepted the explanation without another question. After all, appearance mattered in business. Still, she couldn't remember the last time Grant had cared so much about updating his wardrobe. The thought crossed her mind for only a moment before disappearing beneath the weight of everything else competing for her attention. Hospital staffing shortages had become one of the biggest challenges she'd ever managed. Several experienced nurses had recently retired. Recruiting qualified replacements took time. Schedules changed constantly. Marie often stayed late, helping department supervisors reorganize shifts without exhausting the remaining staff. One afternoon, she finally sat down after nearly 6 straight hours of meetings. A young nurse entered her office carrying a clipboard. "I just wanted to thank you." Marie looked up. "For what?" "You stayed after your shift yesterday." "You didn't have to." Marie smiled. "Yes, I did." The nurse looked confused. "No one else would have." Marie leaned back slightly. "When people feel supported, they do their best work." The young woman nodded. "I hope I'm that kind of leader someday." Marie smiled again. "You will be." The conversation stayed with Marie during the drive home. She believed leadership depended on showing up consistently for people. She believed marriages worked the same way. That belief made it even harder for her to imagine that Grant might be slowly stepping away from theirs. Several days later, Jessica rushed through the front door carrying a science project. "Mom!" Marie looked up from the kitchen. "What happened?" "I got first place." Marie laughed and wrapped her daughter in a hug. "I knew you would." Jessica beamed. "Dad's going to be so excited." Marie reached for her phone. "I'll tell him." Grant answered on the 4th ring. "Hey, you'll never guess what happened." "What?" "Jessica won first place." There was a short pause. "That's great." Marie smiled. "She wants to tell you herself." "I wish I could." "I'm walking into a client meeting. Can I call later?" "Of course." Jessica's smile faded only slightly. "It's okay. I'll tell him tonight." Marie kissed the top of her daughter's head. "He'll be proud of you." He was. When Grant returned home that evening, he hugged Jessica and congratulated her. But halfway through dinner, he asked, "So, what was your project about again?" Jessica answered politely. Still, Marie noticed the disappointment hidden behind her daughter's smile. Grant had listened. He simply hadn't been fully present. The moments continued collecting. Small enough to ignore, frequent enough to matter. Friday movie nights slowly became interrupted by business calls. Weekend breakfasts ended with Grant checking emails before anyone else finished eating. Family hikes happened less often because another client needed attention. Jessica asked fewer questions about whether her father would be available. Instead, she started asking whether he thought he would be. Marie quietly answered for him. He'll try. He probably has a lot going on. He really wanted to come. Every explanation protected Grant. She didn't realize she had started doing that automatically. Late one Saturday afternoon, Grant stood in the backyard answering another phone call. Marie watched him through the kitchen window while preparing lemonade. He smiled. Not the polite smile he used with clients. A relaxed smile, almost playful. When he came back inside, she handed him a glass. Everything okay? Yeah. One of the developers? Grant hesitated for less than a second. Something like that. Marie nodded. She didn't press further. There had always been professional conversations she didn't fully understand. She assumed this was another one. That evening, Grant left his phone charging on the kitchen counter while taking a shower. The screen lit up. A message appeared. Good luck tomorrow. Don't work too hard. There was no last name. Only Chloe. Marie looked at the screen for 2 seconds. Nothing more. She looked away immediately. Grant had mentioned Chloe years earlier while they were dating. An old relationship. Someone who had moved away long before Marie entered his life. Seeing the name surprised her. But surprise wasn't the same as suspicion. When Grant returned downstairs, she simply asked, I saw Chloe's name on your phone. He looked toward the counter. Oh, I forgot to tell you. She moved back to Charlotte. When? A while ago. How long is a while? He shrugged casually. Maybe a couple of months. You've been talking? Only occasionally. Marie opened the refrigerator and placed leftovers inside. That's nice. How's she doing? Grant leaned against the counter. Her engagement ended. Oh, I hate hearing that. So do I. The conversation ended there. Marie never considered asking more questions. She believed adults could reconnect with people from their past without crossing boundaries. Grant had always respected their marriage. She had no reason to think that had changed. The following Sunday, the family attended church together. After the service, several couples gathered outside discussing work, children, and upcoming community events. One woman smiled warmly at Marie. I still don't know how you balance everything. Marie laughed. Some days, I wonder the same thing. Grant slipped an arm around her shoulders. She's the one holding all of us together. Everyone laughed. Marie smiled politely. The compliment sounded thoughtful. But as they drove home, she found herself thinking about it. Grant had said she held everything together. He wasn't wrong. What unsettled her was something she couldn't quite explain. He said it so naturally, almost as though keeping everything together was simply who she was. Not something she chose to do every day. Not something that required energy. Not something deserving appreciation. Just something she would always continue doing. Without realizing it, Grant had slowly stopped thanking her for many of the things she handled. Not because he intended to be unkind, because he had grown accustomed to her reliability. Reliability, when experienced every day, often becomes invisible. Marie never complained. She loved her family. Helping them never felt like a burden. She simply hoped that one day Grant would notice the effort instead of only enjoying the results. She still believed the distance between them came from busy schedules. She still believed every marriage passed through seasons that demanded extra patience. She had no idea another conversation was already taking place. Not inside her home, but inside Grant's phone. A conversation that had quietly grown beyond catching up with an old acquaintance. A conversation he kept telling himself was harmless. A conversation that would soon ask him to choose between the life he had built and the excitement of reopening a chapter that should have remained closed. Thursday arrived with steady rain that never seemed to stop. By late afternoon, gray clouds covered Charlotte, and traffic moved more slowly than usual. Marie left the hospital nearly an hour later than she had planned after helping resolve an unexpected staffing problem in the emergency department. She didn't mind staying. She rarely did. Her responsibility didn't end simply because the clock said her shift was over. On the drive home, she called Jessica. "I'm leaving now." Jessica answered immediately. "I already started my chemistry review." "Good. Anything you need from the grocery store?" "No, Mom. We still have everything." Marie smiled. "I'll be home soon." When she pulled into the driveway, the porch lights had already switched on automatically. The familiar sight brought an unexpected sense of comfort. No matter how difficult work became, home had always been the place where life slowed down. She unlocked the front door. "Jessica? I'm upstairs." Marie heard music playing softly from her daughter's bedroom. "I'm studying. I'll start dinner. You need any help?" "I've got it." Marie placed her purse beside the stairs and walked into the kitchen. Cooking had always helped her clear her mind. She chopped onions, minced garlic, added carrots and celery to the pot before stirring everything together. The rich smell slowly spread through the house. By the time the chicken stew began simmering, she finally felt the tension from work begin to fade. She reached for the salt. A pair of familiar footsteps entered the kitchen. Grant. He loosened his tie while placing his briefcase beside the island. "You beat me home," Marie said with a smile. "Barely." He walked over and kissed her forehead. "You look exhausted." "So do you." Grant poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the kitchen island. For several minutes, nothing unusual happened. Jessica's birthday came up first. "We should probably ask what she wants this year," Grant said. Marie laughed. "She changes her mind every week. Last month, she wanted hiking equipment. This week she wants a telescope." Grant smiled. "That's our daughter." Marie nodded. "She's curious about everything." The conversation drifted toward work. Grant mentioned delays involving a commercial office project. Marie spoke about a supervisor she hoped to promote. The discussion felt comfortable, familiar, exactly like hundreds of evenings they had already shared. Then Grant placed his glass on the counter. "There's something I need to talk to you about." Marie continued stirring the stew. "What is it?" Grant looked toward the rain outside before speaking again. "You remember Chloe?" Marie answered without concern. "The woman you dated before we met?" "Yes." "What about her?" Grant folded his hands together. "She contacted me several months ago." Marie looked up. "You never mentioned that." "I didn't think it mattered." The answer surprised her. She lowered the heat beneath the pot. "What does she want?" Grant took a slow breath. "She moved back to Charlotte after her engagement ended." Marie waited. "We've talked a few times." She remained silent. Grant continued. "She told me she never found closure after we broke up." Marie studied him carefully. "And?" Grant looked directly into her eyes. "She asked if I'd spend one night with her." The room became perfectly still. Marie frowned slightly. "I'm sorry. I don't think I heard you." "She asked if we'd spend one night together." Marie searched his face. She expected to find embarrassment, regret, some sign that he understood how unbelievable those words sounded. Instead, he looked calm, almost confident. "You can't be serious." "I am." "You mean—" She forced herself to finish the sentence. "You mean sleep with her." Grant raised both hands. "You're making it sound much worse than it is." Marie blinked slowly. "Worse than what?" "It's about helping her move on." Marie almost laughed. "For who?" "For Chloe." Grant spoke with surprising certainty. "She believes if we finally close that chapter, she'll stop wondering what might have been." Marie stood quietly beside the stove. "You've actually been thinking about this." "I have." "For how long?" Grant hesitated. "A while." "A while?" "I wanted to approach it honestly." Marie stared at him. "You wanted to approach adultery honestly?" Grant sighed. "I wish you wouldn't use words like that." "What word would you prefer?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "It isn't about replacing you. It isn't about changing our marriage. It wouldn't happen again. It would simply help someone from my past move forward." Marie couldn't remember ever hearing him speak so confidently about something that made so little sense. She reached for the wooden spoon again and gently stirred the stew. Not because it needed stirring, because she needed something steady to do with her hands. Grant mistook her silence for consideration. I wanted to tell you instead of hiding it. Marie nodded once. I appreciate honesty. Relief briefly crossed Grant's face. But honesty doesn't erase the decision that came before it. His expression changed. What do you mean? You didn't wake up this morning and suddenly receive this request. No. You've been talking. Grant remained quiet. For months? A little. You've been having conversations with another woman for months. Without telling me. Grant answered carefully. She was going through a difficult time. Marie looked directly at him. So, you became the person helping her through it. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Grant walked a few steps closer. We were just talking. Marie noticed something she had never seen before. He wasn't trying to convince her the conversations happened. He was trying to convince her they didn't matter. That difference settled heavily inside her. She asked quietly, if someone I dated before I met, you called tomorrow. Grant remained silent, and asked me to spend one night with him because he wanted closure. She held his gaze. Would you support that? Grant answered immediately. That's different. Marie didn't raise her voice. How? He searched for an explanation. It just is. No. It isn't. Grant sighed impatiently. I knew you'd react emotionally. Marie looked at him for several long seconds. Then she spoke so calmly that even Grant seemed surprised. I'm not reacting emotionally. I'm listening. And I'm trying to understand how the man I married could believe this conversation would end any other way. Grant folded his arms. I thought you'd understand my position. Marie shook her head gently. No. You thought I'd stay. The sentence caught him off guard. What? You didn't ask because you were afraid of losing me. Grant frowned. I ask because I respect you. Marie slowly placed the wooden spoon on the counter. If you respected me, this conversation wouldn't exist. Grant opened his mouth to respond. Nothing came out. For the first time since he entered the kitchen, he had no prepared answer. Marie looked at him without anger, without tears, without shouting. His silence after her earlier question echoed louder than every explanation he had tried to give. If the situation had been reversed, he would never have accepted it. He knew that. She knew that. Neither of them needed to say it again. After several moments, Marie quietly picked up the spoon. She turned back toward the stove and continued stirring the stew. Grant watched her in confusion. He expected an argument. He expected accusations. He expected tears. Instead, she simply continued making dinner. The ordinary movement unsettled him far more than shouting ever could. Neither of them spoke again while they ate. Jessica came downstairs a few minutes later, happily discussing an upcoming chemistry exam and plans for the weekend. Marie smiled, asked questions, encouraged her. Grant answered when spoken to, but his attention kept drifting toward his wife. Jessica never realized anything had happened. When dinner ended, she carried her dishes to the sink before returning upstairs to study. The house became quiet again. That night, Grant fell asleep within minutes. Marie lay awake beside him, staring into the darkness above their bed. She wasn't replaying the request itself. She kept returning to something much more important: his certainty. At no point had Grant looked frightened that she might leave. Not once had he asked whether their marriage could survive the conversation. He had spoken as though her forgiveness already belonged to him, as though 12 years of loyalty guaranteed another chance before he had even admitted what he wanted. Marie slowly turned her head and looked at the man sleeping peacefully beside her. She realized something that hurt far more than his request. Somewhere over the years, Grant had stopped seeing her loyalty as something precious. He had started treating it as something permanent. That thought stayed with her until morning. For the first time since they married, Marie stopped asking herself whether her husband still loved her. Instead, another question quietly took its place. Did she truly know the man lying beside her at all? Marie barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, She heard Grant's voice again. She asked if I'd spend one night with her. The sentence no longer shocked her. What disturbed her was the confidence behind it. He had spoken as though the marriage could absorb almost anything without breaking. He hadn't pleaded. He hadn't apologized. He had presented the request as something that deserved consideration. Around 5 in the morning, Marie quietly climbed out of bed. Grant remained asleep. His breathing was slow and steady, untouched by the conversation that had kept her awake for most of the night. For a long moment, she stood beside the bed. She looked at him the same way she had looked at him countless mornings over the last 12 years. Only this time, something had changed. She no longer saw only her husband. She saw a man whose actions no longer matched the trust she had given him. Without making a sound, she left the bedroom. The house was completely quiet. She prepared coffee, packed Jessica's lunch, checked the family calendar hanging inside the pantry. Jessica had chemistry tutoring after school. Grant's parents planned to visit in 2 weeks. Jessica's birthday was getting closer. Everything looked exactly the same, only Marie felt different. Jessica came downstairs first. "Morning, Mom." "Morning." Jessica rubbed her eyes. "You look tired." Marie smiled gently. "I had a lot on my mind." "Hospital?" Marie paused. "In a way." Jessica accepted the answer without another question. Grant joined them a few minutes later. He behaved exactly as he always did. He poured coffee, asked Jessica whether she felt ready for her chemistry quiz, complimented the breakfast, even smiled at Marie before leaving for work. "See you tonight." "You will." Grant picked up his briefcase. "I love you." Marie looked at him for a brief second. "So do I." The words came naturally, but they carried a weight they had never carried before. After Jessica left for school, Marie drove toward the hospital. Traffic crawled through the morning rain. Normally, she listened to news or leadership podcasts during her commute. Today, she drove in silence. She wasn't deciding whether to forgive Grant. She wasn't deciding whether to leave him. She had reached only one conclusion. She didn't yet know the whole truth. And until she did, emotion would not make her decisions. The hospital demanded her attention almost immediately. 2 departments needed emergency staffing adjustments. A scheduled surgery had been delayed because of equipment maintenance. Several administrators waited outside her office before she even sat down. Marie worked through every problem with the same calm professionalism that had earned the respect of everyone around her. No one noticed that her thoughts repeatedly returned to the previous evening. Late that morning, she walked through one of the nursing stations. A supervisor approached her. "We're short 2 people this afternoon." Marie studied the staffing board. "What options have we already tried?" The supervisor explained every possible solution. Marie listened carefully before answering. "Before we move anyone from another department, let's verify the actual patient numbers after lunch." The supervisor nodded. "You want more information first?" "Always." The conversation stayed with Marie as she continued walking down the hallway. More information first. That simple principle had guided her career for years. Why should her marriage be any different? At lunchtime, she sat alone in her office instead of joining coworkers. She opened her laptop, not her personal email, the family's shared budgeting spreadsheet. Marie had managed the household finances since the first year of their marriage. It wasn't because Grant refused. He simply preferred that she handle it. Every paycheck, every mortgage payment, every insurance bill, every school expense. She knew where every dollar normally went. At first, everything appeared ordinary. Mortgage, utilities, Jessica's piano lessons, groceries, car insurance, nothing unusual. Then one transaction caught her attention. A hotel charge, expensive. She frowned slightly. Grant often stayed in hotels during business trips. That wasn't unusual. Still, she checked the date. Then she opened Grant's shared travel calendar. No overnight business trip appeared that week. Perhaps he forgot to update the calendar. She kept looking. Another hotel, different weekend, another city. Again, no corresponding work schedule. Interesting. Not proof. Simply something worth remembering. Marie continued scrolling. Several restaurant charges stood out next. Upscale locations, much more expensive than Grant usually spent during business travel. Again, perhaps client dinners. She checked his company itinerary. Nothing matched. She leaned back in her chair. Her breathing remained steady. People often rush toward conclusions. She refused to become one of them. There could still be reasonable explanations. She closed the laptop. Work demanded her attention again. The rest of the afternoon disappeared beneath meetings, staffing decisions, and budget reviews. By the time she left the hospital, she had almost convinced herself she was overthinking everything. Then she arrived home. Grant's car wasn't there. Jessica sat at the kitchen table, finishing homework. "Dad working late again?" Jessica asked without looking up. "So he said." Jessica nodded. "He works late a lot now." Marie placed groceries on the counter. "He does." Jessica hesitated. "I miss Friday movie nights." Marie smiled softly. "So do I." Jessica returned to her homework. Children notice changes adults often believed they had hidden. That realization stayed with Marie throughout dinner. Grant finally arrived shortly after 8. He apologized. A client meeting ran longer than expected. Marie looked at him calmly. "Did everything go well?" "It did." He sounded completely relaxed. Too relaxed. She watched him while they ate. His phone rested beside his plate. Twice, it vibrated. Twice, he glanced down before turning the screen away. Jessica kept talking about school. Grant smiled, responded, asked questions. But his attention never stayed in one place for very long. After dinner, he carried his plate to the sink. "I've got another early meeting tomorrow." Marie nodded. "I'll probably leave before breakfast." "No problem." He thanked her for dinner, walked upstairs. Marie remained alone in the kitchen. She quietly loaded the dishwasher, wiped the countertops, turned off the dining room lights. Every movement felt familiar, comforting, predictable, yet her thoughts refused to settle. The following afternoon she finally did something she rarely allowed herself during working hours. She called Danielle. "Everything okay?" Danielle asked immediately. Marie smiled faintly. "You always know when something's wrong." "I've known you too long." Marie looked through the window of her office. "I need to ask you something." "I'm listening." "Have you ever reached a point where something didn't feel right?" "What? But you couldn't explain why?" Danielle answered without hesitation. "Yes." "What did you do?" "I paid attention." Marie remained quiet. Danielle continued. "Not because I wanted to prove anything. Because ignoring a feeling doesn't make it disappear." Marie looked down at her desk. "I don't want to accuse someone unfairly." "Then don't. Find the truth first." The advice sounded remarkably similar to what Marie had already been telling herself. Danielle didn't ask for details. She respected Marie enough to wait until she was ready. "I'll tell you when I know more. I'll be here." After ending the call, Marie opened her notebook. She wrote one sentence across the top of a blank page. "Evidence before conclusions." She stared at the words for several seconds. Then she opened the household budget again. This time, she wasn't looking for reasons to trust Grant. She was looking for facts. Because facts didn't depend on fear. They didn't depend on hope. They simply existed. For the first time since the conversation in the kitchen, Marie stopped trying to convince herself everything would return to normal. If her marriage could still be saved, it would have to be built on truth. And before she made a single life-changing decision, she intended to find every piece of it. 3 days passed. Marie didn't ask Grant another question about Chloe. She didn't bring up the conversation in the kitchen. She didn't search his pockets. She didn't check his phone. From Grant's perspective, the difficult discussion seemed to have faded away. That assumption made him more comfortable. It also made him less careful. Life inside the Wilson home continued with the same familiar rhythm. Marie went to work before sunrise. Grant traveled between meetings. Jessica balanced school, piano practice, and soccer. Dinner appeared on the table every evening. Laundry was folded. The house remained orderly. Anyone looking from outside would have seen the same dependable family they had always seen. Only Marie knew something fundamental had changed. She had stopped accepting appearances as proof. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear, after several days of rain. Grant walked downstairs carrying a small travel bag. "I've got to meet a client in Greensboro." Marie poured coffee into Jessica's favorite mug. "What time do you think you'll be home?" "Tomorrow evening." Jessica looked disappointed. "I thought we were going to finish that puzzle." Grant smiled apologetically. "We will. I promise." Jessica nodded, though her excitement had already faded. Marie watched the exchange quietly. Grant kissed Jessica on the forehead. "I'll make it up to you." Then he kissed Marie. "I'll call tonight. Drive safely." "I will." A few minutes later, his car disappeared around the corner. Jessica gathered her books. "I'll be in my room. I've got a history project. I'll bring you lunch when it's ready." The house became unusually quiet. Marie carried empty coffee cups into the kitchen. She intended to spend the morning organizing closets and catching up on paperwork. That had been her plan. As she reached for a stack of folders inside the family room, her eyes settled on the tablet Jessica used for school assignments. The device rested exactly where Jessica had left it the previous evening. Marie picked it up without thinking. Jessica often used it for homework because the larger screen made research easier than using a phone. Marie pressed the power button. The screen lit up immediately. A notification appeared across the top, a messaging application. Grant's initials appeared beside the account profile. Marie frowned. Months earlier, Grant had borrowed the tablet while helping Jessica install a document-sharing application required by her school. He had signed into one of his accounts during the setup. Apparently, he had never signed back out. Marie stared at the screen. Her thumb rested against the edge of the tablet. She could simply lock it again, walk away, pretend she had never noticed. For nearly a full minute, she didn't move. She had always believed that trust included respecting privacy. She had never searched through Grant's messages during their marriage. Never. Even after the conversation about Chloe, she had resisted doing exactly this. But another thought slowly settled into her mind. Grant had already admitted months of communication. He had admitted considering another woman. He had asked permission to sleep with her. The marriage had already crossed a line neither of them could ignore. Marie wasn't opening the account because of curiosity. She needed to know whether the truth matched the story Grant had told her. She opened the application. Several conversations appeared. Work contacts, clients, co-workers, family. Then she saw it. Chloe. Her heartbeat slowed. She touched the conversation. The newest message appeared first. "I miss you already." Grant's reply followed a minute later. "Next weekend can't come soon enough." Marie stopped reading. She closed her eyes. Not because she wanted to avoid the truth, because she needed one steady breath before continuing. When she looked again, she scrolled upward. The messages stretched back for months. Not days, not weeks, months. There had been no long gaps between conversations. Some days they exchanged dozens of messages. Others, only a few. But they had remained connected almost every day. Grant hadn't described an old girlfriend reaching out during a difficult season. He had rebuilt a place for Chloe in his daily life. Marie kept reading. Their earliest conversations seemed harmless. Questions about work, Charlotte, mutual acquaintances, favorite restaurants that had survived over the years, shared memories from long before Grant met Marie. Nothing crossed obvious boundaries. At least not at first. Several weeks later, the tone shifted. Inside jokes appeared, private nicknames, photos of meals, plans to meet for coffee, conversations that lasted late into the night. Marie continued scrolling. Grant wrote, "I haven't laughed this much in years." Chloe answered, "Maybe because we're finally talking again." Marie swallowed quietly. There was no point pretending those messages meant nothing. She kept reading. Another exchange appeared after one of Grant's overnight business trips. "Made it home. Already miss you. Wish the weekend hadn't ended." Marie looked at the date. She remembered that weekend perfectly. Grant had told her he was attending property meetings outside Raleigh. She had stayed home helping Jessica prepare for a science competition. She kept reading. One message made her stop. "I hate lying to you." It came from Chloe. Grant answered almost immediately. You aren't lying to me. You're waiting for me. Marie frowned. She scrolled farther. The conversation continued. I don't want to hurt anyone. You aren't. My marriage has been over for years. Marie read the sentence again. Then again. She didn't recognize the life Grant described afterward. According to him, Marie cared only about work. They barely spoke. They lived separate lives under the same roof. They stayed together solely because of Jessica. There was no affection, no partnership, no future. Marie lowered the tablet. She wasn't reading about herself. She was reading about a fictional version of herself created by her husband. She looked toward the living room where family photographs covered one wall. Vacations, birthdays, Christmas mornings, soccer tournaments, hospital awards ceremonies, anniversary dinners. Those memories had been real. Their marriage had experienced difficult seasons, like every other marriage. But it had never resembled the empty relationship Grant described to Chloe. He hadn't simply hidden the truth from one woman. He had invented a different truth for another. Marie returned to the messages. Several entries later, Chloe asked a question. Have you told Marie yet? Grant replied, Not yet. I'm waiting for the right time. I don't want Jessica caught in the middle. Another message followed. Once everything is settled, we can stop hiding. Marie leaned back against the sofa. One realization became impossible to ignore. Chloe wasn't celebrating an affair. She believed she was waiting for a man trapped inside a marriage that had already ended. Grant had carefully built that belief. Every conversation reinforced it. Every omission protected it. Every lie made the next lie easier. Marie felt disappointment. She felt sadness. But anger still refused to arrive. Instead, she noticed something else. Grant had been managing two completely different lives. At home, he played the role of devoted husband and father. With Chloe, he played the role of a man patiently waiting for freedom. Both women believed they understood his reality. Neither woman had been given the whole truth. Marie slowly locked the tablet. She placed it exactly where Jessica had left it. Nothing in the room appeared different. The morning sunlight still reached across the hardwood floor. Jessica continued studying upstairs. Cars passed quietly outside. The ordinary world continued moving. Only Marie's understanding had changed. She walked into her home office, opened the top drawer of her desk, removed a fresh notebook. On the first page, she wrote 4 simple words. Facts before feelings. She underlined them once, then closed the notebook. At that moment, Marie stopped searching for reassurance. She stopped hoping someone would explain everything away. She accepted one unavoidable truth. Whatever happened next, every decision she made would be based on evidence, not promises, not apologies, and certainly not assumptions. Marie closed the notebook and remained seated at her desk for several minutes. The words she had written occupied only one line. Facts before feelings. Simple, clear, enough to remind her of the promise she had just made to herself. She had spent years helping hospital administrators make difficult decisions. Every policy change, staffing adjustment, and emergency response depended on verified information rather than assumptions. Acting too quickly often created problems that never should have existed. Her marriage deserved the same discipline. She refused to become someone driven by anger. She would become someone guided by truth. Jessica came downstairs carrying several library books. I'm starving. Marie looked up and smiled. I was just about to make lunch. Jessica sat at the kitchen island. Did Dad call yet? Not yet. He said he would. I'm sure he will. Jessica nodded and opened one of her history books. Marie watched her daughter reading while she prepared grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. Nothing about Jessica's life had changed. At least not yet. Marie intended to keep it that way for as long as possible. Grant's choices had already created enough uncertainty. Jessica didn't deserve to carry any of it. That evening, Grant called exactly when he promised. Jessica answered first. Hi, Dad. Marie could hear Grant laughing through the speaker. How's my favorite scientist? Jessica smiled. I finished my history project. I knew you would. They talked for several minutes before Jessica handed the phone to Marie. Everything going well? Grant asked. So far? How's Jessica? Busy as always. Grant laughed softly. Sounds about right. Marie listened carefully. His voice sounded relaxed, comfortable. Nothing suggested he believed he had done anything that might permanently damage his family. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. When the call ended, Marie stared at the phone for a moment before placing it back on the counter. She wasn't listening for guilt anymore. She was listening for consistency. The next morning, Grant returned home shortly before noon. Jessica ran outside before he finished parking. You made it. I told you I would. Grant hugged his daughter tightly. Marie stood on the porch, watching them. For a brief moment, she wished she had never opened the tablet. The family standing in front of her looked complete. Grant carried Jessica's overnight project inside. He smiled at Marie. I brought your favorite coffee. He handed her a paper cup from a local cafe. Thought you might enjoy it. Marie accepted it. Thank you. The gesture would have meant everything a few weeks earlier. Now she found herself asking a different question. Had he stopped for coffee alone? Or with Chloe? She immediately pushed the thought aside. Speculation accomplished nothing. Only evidence mattered. That afternoon, while Grant watched a basketball game with Jessica in the living room, Marie quietly entered the home office. She opened her laptop, then created a new folder. She titled it Household Records. Inside it, she created another folder, Financial Documents. She downloaded monthly bank statements covering the previous year, mortgage records, credit card summaries, savings account activity, retirement contributions, tax documents, everything she already managed as part of the household. Nothing illegal, nothing secret. Simply copies of information she had always maintained. When she finished, she created another folder, Travel Records. Using the family calendar, she began listing every business trip Grant had taken during the previous several months. Dates, cities, length of each trip. Then she compared those dates with the hotel charges she had already noticed. Several matched legitimate work travel. Several didn't. She highlighted only the ones requiring further explanation. She refused to label anything as proof until every detail could be verified. Her phone buzzed. Danielle. Marie answered immediately. How are you holding up? I'm thinking more than sleeping. Danielle gave a small laugh. That sounds like you. Marie leaned back in her chair. I found more information. You don't have to tell me unless you're ready. I know. There was a brief silence. Finally, Danielle spoke. Whatever happens, don't lose yourself trying to understand someone else's choices. Marie looked toward the family room where Jessica was laughing at something Grant had said. I'm trying not to. You've spent years solving everyone's problems. You don't have to solve this today. Marie smiled faintly. I don't think this is something I can solve. No. Danielle answered gently. But you can decide how you respond. After ending the call, Marie remained thoughtful for several minutes. Danielle hadn't asked for details. She hadn't encouraged revenge. She hadn't pressured Marie toward divorce. She had simply reminded her that good decisions required patience. That afternoon, Grant suggested ordering takeout. My treat. Jessica immediately voted for barbecue. Grant laughed. I had a feeling you'd pick that. The three of them spent the evening together. Grant appeared unusually attentive. He helped Jessica with a difficult math problem, asked Marie about the hospital, cleared the dinner table without being asked. If someone had walked into the house that night, they would have believed nothing was wrong. Marie recognized something important. One good evening could not erase months of hidden choices. Neither could one apology. Consistency always mattered more than isolated moments. Late that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Marie returned to the home office. She created another folder, Communications. She carefully documented the dates she had observed from the synchronized messages without altering or deleting anything. She noted when conversations increased, when overnight trips matched message activity, when promises appeared. She wasn't building an emotional argument. She was building a timeline. Next, she created another folder, Parenting. At first, she hesitated. This wasn't about proving Grant was a bad father. He loved Jessica. Marie believed that. But love and involvement weren't always the same. She opened the family calendar again. Every parent-teacher conference, every dentist appointment, every soccer practice, every piano recital, every science competition, every doctor's visit, every school meeting, every emergency pickup. She listed them one by one. Beside each event she recorded who attended. Sometimes both parents. Many times only Marie. She included nothing based on memory alone. School emails confirmed conferences. Appointment reminders confirmed medical visits. Coaches' schedules confirmed games. Everything could be verified. She looked at the growing collection of folders, financial documents, travel records, communications, parenting. Each represented a different part of the same story. Individually, they answered only small questions. Together, they would eventually reveal the larger truth. Marie closed her laptop. She carried the notebook back to her bedroom. Grant was already asleep. She sat quietly on the edge of the bed. For the first time since the conversation in the kitchen, she realized her purpose had changed. During those first hours, she wanted reassurance. She wanted someone to explain why her husband had asked such an impossible question. She wanted to believe everything could still return to the life they had built. That hope had disappeared. Not because she had stopped loving Grant, because every new fact carried her farther away from the version of him she thought she knew. She opened the notebook one last time before turning off the light. Beneath the words "facts before feelings," she added another sentence. "Truth deserves patience." She closed the notebook, placed it inside the bedside drawer, turned off the lamp. As sleep finally began to overtake her, one realization settled firmly in her mind. She was no longer gathering information to save her marriage. She was gathering information to understand how much of it had already been lost. Monday morning arrived with clear skies over Charlotte, but Marie felt none of the relief that usually came with the start of a new week. She parked in the employee garage before sunrise and sat inside her car for several minutes without reaching for her briefcase. For nearly 2 weeks, she had lived according to one rule: facts before feelings. That rule had carried her farther than she ever expected. She had verified unusual hotel charges, compared travel dates, read months of conversations between Grant and Chloe, built timelines instead of arguments, collected records instead of assumptions. Every piece fit together more neatly than she wanted it to. Yet one question remained unanswered. What should she do with everything she now knew? Marie rested both hands on the steering wheel. She wasn't looking for someone to tell her whether to leave her husband. She needed to understand what her legal responsibilities and options actually were before emotion complicated every decision. By the time she walked into the hospital, she had already made up her mind. During her lunch break, she would make one phone call. Nothing more, nothing less. The morning disappeared beneath staff meetings, patient flow reports, and budget discussions. Marie performed every responsibility with the same professionalism everyone expected from her. No one suspected that the woman calmly solving administrative problems had spent the previous weekend discovering that her marriage existed very differently inside her husband's mind than it did inside her own. Just before noon, she closed her office door. She picked up her phone. After searching for only a moment, she dialed the number Danielle had recommended years earlier during an unrelated conversation about estate planning. The receptionist answered warmly. "Good afternoon." Marie introduced herself. "I'd like to schedule a confidential consultation." "Certainly." The receptionist asked only practical questions. Preferred meeting time, general nature of the consultation, contact information, nothing intrusive. An appointment became available the following morning before Marie's hospital shift began. She accepted it immediately. When the call ended, Marie felt neither relief nor fear. Only clarity. She wasn't preparing for divorce. She was preparing to understand the truth from every angle before making permanent decisions. That distinction mattered deeply to her. The following morning, Marie arrived 15 minutes early. The law office occupied the upper floor of a quiet professional building overlooking one of Charlotte's business districts. Everything inside reflected careful organization. Shelves filled with neatly arranged legal volumes, framed certificates, simple furniture, nothing extravagant, nothing intended to impress clients through appearances alone. A receptionist welcomed her before guiding her toward a private conference room. A few moments later, Naomi Ellison entered carrying a legal pad. She greeted Marie with a firm handshake and an expression that conveyed attention rather than judgment. "Thank you for coming in. Thank you for seeing me." Naomi took her seat. "What would you like to accomplish today?" Marie appreciated the wording. Naomi hadn't asked what happened. She had asked what Marie hoped to accomplish. Marie opened her notebook. "I don't know whether my marriage can survive." Naomi nodded, but remained silent. "I've discovered information that concerns me." Marie carefully explained everything from the beginning. Grant, reconnecting with Chloe. The request for one night together. The financial inconsistencies. The synchronized messages. The timelines she had assembled. She avoided exaggeration. Whenever she wasn't certain of something, she said so openly. Naomi listened without interrupting. She asked only occasional questions to clarify dates or confirm documents. When Marie finished speaking, several moments passed before Naomi responded. "You've approached this very carefully." Marie looked surprised. "I wasn't sure whether I was overthinking everything." Naomi gently shook her head. "Most people come here after a heated argument. They're angry. They want immediate answers. You brought organized records. You separated facts from assumptions. That makes every conversation easier." Marie quietly folded her hands. "What should I do now?" Naomi answered carefully. "First, continue documenting only things you can verify. No guesses. No emotional conclusions." Marie nodded. "Second, don't announce any decisions before you're prepared to follow through." Again, Marie nodded. "Third, learn exactly what your family's financial picture looks like." Marie frowned slightly. "I already manage our finances." "You manage the bills," Naomi replied calmly. "I'm talking about everything. Assets, retirement, property, credit, travel spending, shared accounts, anything that could become important later." Marie slowly realized she had focused mostly on the affair itself. Naomi was looking at the entire future. What if there are financial transactions I don't recognize? Then we verify them. Not emotionally. Professionally. Naomi reached into a folder beside her. "I'd like someone to review your records." Marie looked up. "A forensic accountant. He specializes in identifying financial patterns people often overlook." Marie considered the suggestion. "I think that's a good idea." Naomi smiled slightly. "I do too." Before leaving, Marie asked one final question. "If I eventually decide to leave, how do I know when the time is right?" Naomi didn't answer immediately. Instead, she leaned back thoughtfully. "When your decision no longer depends on proving someone else was wrong." Marie remained silent. Naomi continued. "When your decision depends on protecting the life you want moving forward." Marie thanked her. Those words stayed with her throughout the rest of the day. 2 afternoons later, she met Victor Hale. Unlike the attorney's office, Victor's workspace looked more like an accounting department than a legal practice. Computer monitors displayed spreadsheets instead of legal documents. File cabinets lined one wall. Everything reflected precision. Victor greeted Marie politely. Naomi had already forwarded the financial records. "I've spent the last day reviewing what you've gathered." Marie sat quietly. "I've noticed several things." Victor opened a detailed spreadsheet. "Individually, these transactions don't necessarily suggest misconduct." He highlighted several entries: luxury hotels, high-end restaurants, cash withdrawals, travel expenses, recurring payments. Marie studied the figures. "What happens when you compare them?" Victor pressed a key. Several matching dates appeared side by side. "That's where patterns begin." He pointed toward one series of transactions. These hotel stays don't correspond with legitimate business travel. Another section followed. Several restaurant charges occur in cities where no documented client meetings existed. Marie felt her stomach tighten. Victor continued, I'm also seeing recurring monthly payments. For what? I wasn't sure yesterday. I am now. He opened another document. Property records. Marie leaned forward. Victor turned the monitor slightly toward her. A condominium lease. Charlotte. Start date. Exactly 7 months earlier. Marie looked at the address. What is this? A leased condominium. She stared silently. Grant had never mentioned renting another property. Victor continued speaking. The lease payments match recurring transfers from one of your shared financial accounts. Marie looked back at the spreadsheet. 7 months. Not one evening. Not one mistake. 7 months. Victor spoke gently. I realize this is difficult. Marie slowly nodded. I thought the request he made in our kitchen was the beginning. She paused. It wasn't. Victor remained respectfully quiet. Marie finally understood something that had been hidden inside Grant's request from the very beginning. He had never been asking permission to begin something with Chloe. He had already begun. The conversation in the kitchen hadn't been honesty. It had been an attempt to reveal only a fraction of the truth while keeping the rest safely out of sight. Marie closed the file. For several long moments neither of them spoke. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was watching 12 years of certainty quietly rearrange themselves into an entirely different reality. And for the first time since this journey began, she understood that the truth was far larger than an affair. It was an entire second life Grant had built, while believing she would never notice. Marie drove home from Victor Hale's office, with the radio turned off. Charlotte's afternoon traffic moved steadily around her, but she barely noticed it. Every traffic light, every intersection, every familiar building faded into the background, while her mind replayed one number. 7 months. Grant hadn't stumbled into a mistake. He had built a routine. He had signed a lease, paid monthly rent, used money that belonged to their household, all while coming home every evening, sitting at the family dinner table, laughing with Jessica, and thanking Marie for keeping everything together. The realization hurt, not because of the affair alone, because it had required planning. Planning meant intention. By the time she pulled into the driveway, she had made another quiet decision. From that day forward, she would stop organizing her future around someone else's choices. She would begin organizing it around her own. Jessica was still at piano practice. Grant had texted earlier that another client meeting would keep him late. Marie unlocked the front door and stepped into the silent house. For years, she had loved moments like this. The quiet gave her time to prepare dinner, answer emails, and plan the following day. Today, the silence served a different purpose. She walked directly to the home office. Her laptop waited exactly where she had left it. She opened it. The folders she had created over the previous week appeared neatly arranged across the screen. Financial documents, travel records, communications, parenting. She looked at them for a moment, then created another folder, personal planning. Inside it, she added several subfolders: personal banking, retirement, insurance, property records, Jessica's education, emergency contacts. She wasn't hiding money. She wasn't moving assets illegally. Everything she did remained completely transparent and lawful. For years, she had handled nearly every administrative responsibility inside their household. Now she simply began organizing copies that related directly to her own future. She downloaded her retirement statements, printed recent insurance information, verified the balance inside Jessica's education fund, checked beneficiary information where the law permitted updates. Every task reminded her how much of their family's foundation she had quietly maintained without anyone noticing. Grant had often joked that she performed magic. It had never been magic. It had been work. Careful, consistent work repeated over thousands of ordinary days. Her phone buzzed. "Jessica, I'm ready whenever you are. I'll leave now." Marie closed the laptop. By the time she reached the music academy, Jessica was already waiting outside with her backpack resting against her feet. "How was practice?" Jessica smiled. "I finally played the whole piece without stopping." "I knew you could." Jessica climbed into the passenger seat. "Can we get ice cream?" Marie laughed softly. "Before dinner?" "Just this once." Marie looked at her daughter. The hopeful smile reminded her that some parts of life still deserved protecting. "I think we can manage that." They stopped at a neighborhood ice cream shop on the way home. Jessica talked almost the entire time. School, friends, a science project. She wanted to enter into another competition. Marie listened carefully. She asked questions. She laughed. For nearly 30 minutes, she allowed herself to simply be Jessica's mother, instead of someone trying to understand the collapse of her marriage. As they drove home, Jessica looked out the window. "Mom?" "Yes?" "Have you ever had one of those days where you know something's changing, but you don't know what it is yet?" Marie glanced toward her daughter. "What made you think about that?" Jessica shrugged. "I don't know. It just feels different lately." Marie tightened her hands around the steering wheel for only a moment before relaxing them again. "What feels different?" Jessica thought carefully before answering. "Dad's around." "But he isn't really around." Marie remained silent. "I don't know how to explain it." "You don't have to." Jessica looked down. "I miss how things used to be." Marie reached across the center console and gently squeezed her daughter's hand. "So do I." Neither of them spoke again until they reached home. That evening, Grant arrived shortly before dinner carrying a bakery box. Jessica smiled immediately. "Cheesecake? I remembered your favorite." Jessica hugged him. "Thanks, Dad." Grant looked pleased with himself. Marie watched quietly from the kitchen. She wasn't angry. She simply noticed something she had overlooked for years. Grant had become very good at repairing disappointment with gestures. A favorite dessert, flowers, small surprises. They were thoughtful, but they almost always appeared after an absence, not before one. During dinner, Grant spoke enthusiastically about a possible promotion. "If everything goes well over the next few months, I may end up managing a larger territory." Jessica smiled. "That's exciting." "It could be." Grant turned toward Marie. "What do you think?" Marie answered honestly. "I think opportunities usually come with more responsibility." Grant laughed. "They certainly do." The conversation moved on. Only Marie knew another thought had crossed her mind. Grant was making plans for a future he assumed would remain exactly as he imagined. He had no idea she was quietly preparing for a completely different future. Over the next several days, Marie continued her routine exactly as before. She woke early, prepared breakfast, went to work, helped Jessica study, answered hospital emergencies. Nothing about her behavior suggested she had begun reorganizing her life. That consistency relaxed Grant. He gradually stopped watching her reactions. He assumed the difficult conversation in the kitchen had passed. One evening he even smiled while helping clear the dinner table. "I'm glad we talked." Marie looked at him. "So am I." Grant interpreted the answer as forgiveness. Marie meant something entirely different. The truth had begun with that conversation. Without it, she might never have started looking more closely. Late Friday afternoon, after finishing another demanding week at the hospital, Marie stopped by her bank. She requested that her salary begin depositing into an individual account, opened in her own name. Nothing unusual, nothing hidden. She remained fully transparent regarding shared marital finances. This account simply allowed her to separate future income while she determined what direction her life would take. Walking back to her car, she felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks. Not happiness, not relief, confidence. Not because her problems had disappeared, because she had stopped waiting for someone else to solve them. Saturday morning, Grant announced another overnight business trip. Jessica looked disappointed, but said nothing. Grant noticed. "I'll make next weekend completely about us." Jessica smiled politely. "Okay." After he left, Marie stood at the front window watching his car disappear. She no longer wondered where he was going. Victor's report had answered that question. She turned away from the window, walked into the home office, opened her laptop, then added several new documents to her growing collection. Updated account information, insurance records, property copies, retirement statements. Everything remained carefully labeled, carefully dated, carefully organized. As she worked, she suddenly understood something that had never occurred to her before. She had spent years protecting every part of her family's future. Now, for the first time, she was protecting herself with the same care. The realization didn't make her feel guilty. It made her feel responsible. That evening, Grant sent Jessica a cheerful message asking about her soccer practice. A few minutes later, another message arrived from Marie. Hope you and Jessica are having a good evening. See you tomorrow. Love you. Marie looked at the screen. Months earlier, those words would have comforted her. Now they felt strangely distant, not because she doubted he cared in some way, because she had learned that affection without honesty could no longer be trusted. She placed the phone on the nightstand without replying immediately. Then she opened her notebook. Below the words facts before feelings, below truth deserves patience, she added one final sentence. Peace begins the moment you stop depending on deception to define your future. Marie closed the notebook gently. Outside, the neighborhood settled into another quiet evening. Inside the house, nothing appeared different. But deep within herself, something important had already changed. She was no longer surviving each day. She was quietly becoming independent of the life Grant still believed she would never leave. The following Tuesday began like every other weekday. Marie arrived at the hospital before sunrise, reviewed overnight reports, answered messages waiting in her inbox, and joined the morning leadership briefing. By 8 o'clock, every department manager had gathered around the conference table. The discussion focused on staffing projections for the coming month. One department requested additional nurses. Another needed new equipment. The finance office presented updated operating costs. Marie listened carefully, taking notes as each manager explained their concerns. When everyone finished, she looked around the room. We can't solve every problem today. Several people nodded. But we can decide which problems deserve immediate attention and which ones require long-term planning. The meeting continued for another hour. As people began leaving, one of the department supervisors remained behind. I appreciate how calm you stay. Marie smiled politely. It helps everyone else think clearly. The supervisor laughed. I wish I could do that. Marie gathered her notebook. It gets easier when you separate the situation from the emotion. She left the room before realizing she had just described exactly how she had been living her own life. That afternoon, she drove home earlier than usual. Jessica's soccer practice had been canceled because of maintenance work on the athletic fields. Marie found her sitting at the dining room table surrounded by science books and colored note cards. Jessica looked up. You're home early. I thought we could spend some time together. Jessica smiled immediately. I'd like that. Marie placed her purse on the chair beside the table. What are you working on? A presentation about renewable energy. Jessica handed her several pages. I can't decide which ending sounds better. Marie carefully read every page. The project was thoughtful, well-organized, and supported by careful research. You've done a great job. Jessica smiled proudly. I learned that from watching you. Marie looked at her daughter. What do you mean? You always organize everything. Jessica shrugged. You make lists. You label folders. You plan ahead. I guess I started doing the same thing. Marie laughed softly. I never noticed. Jessica grinned. You notice everything else. They spent almost an hour adjusting the presentation together. By the time they finished, sunlight had begun fading outside. Jessica closed her notebook. Can I ask you something? Of course. Jessica hesitated. You'll tell me the truth? I always will. Jessica looked down at the table before speaking. Is Dad unhappy? The question caught Marie completely off guard. What makes you ask that? Jessica searched for the right words. He smiles. He jokes. But... She stopped. Marie waited patiently. It's like Moise was somewhere else. Marie remained completely still. Jessica continued. I used to know exactly when he'd come to my soccer games. Now I never know. He says he'll be there. Sometimes he is. Sometimes he isn't. She folded her hands together. I stopped telling my friends he was coming. Marie felt her heart tighten. Not because Jessica sounded angry, because she sounded resigned. Children should never become accustomed to lowering their expectations. Jessica continued quietly. I know he loves me. I know that. But I don't think he notices when he misses things anymore. Marie reached across the table. She gently held her daughter's hand. Thank you for telling me. Jessica looked embarrassed. I wasn't trying to complain. I know. Jessica searched for another way to explain herself. I miss us. Marie swallowed carefully. So do I. Jessica looked toward the family photographs hanging on the hallway wall. Remember when we used to hike every month? I do. And movie nights? Marie nodded. I remember. Jessica smiled sadly. I keep thinking we're going to start doing those things again. Marie didn't answer immediately. She realized something painful. Jessica wasn't asking for expensive vacations. She wasn't asking for gifts. She simply wanted her father to consistently show up. That evening, Grant called shortly before dinner. Jessica answered. They talked for several minutes. Marie listened while setting the table. I'll try to make your game Saturday. Jessica smiled. I hope you can. Grant laughed. I'll do my best. Jessica ended the call. She didn't look excited. She simply nodded to herself before helping Marie carry plates to the table. Marie noticed the difference immediately. Months ago, Jessica would have celebrated. Now she waited to see whether the promise became reality. Grant had slowly taught his daughter not to expect certainty. The realization stayed with Marie long after dinner ended. Later that night, while folding laundry in the bedroom, she reached inside one of Grant's suit jackets before placing it in the closet. She always checked pockets before washing clothes. Business cards, receipts, loose change, pens, nothing unusual. Her fingers touched folded paper. She pulled it out without thinking. A receipt. She unfolded it. A jewelry store. Purchase completed the previous afternoon. Marie looked farther down the page. Her breathing remained steady. Diamond engagement ring. She read the description twice, then looked at the purchase amount. It wasn't a repair. It wasn't a cleaning service. It was a new ring. The date matched the same overnight trip Grant had described as another client meeting. Marie slowly sat on the edge of the bed. She already knew the answer before asking herself the question. The ring wasn't for her. Their anniversary had passed months earlier. Her birthday wasn't approaching. Grant had never mentioned replacing her wedding ring. She folded the receipt exactly the way she had found it, then slipped it back into the jacket pocket. No dramatic confrontation, no tears, no phone call. She simply stood and finished hanging the suit inside the closet. For several minutes she remained alone in the bedroom. The silence felt different now. Until that moment, a very small part of her had continued hoping there might still be information she hadn't discovered. Perhaps Grant had become emotionally involved before losing his judgment. Perhaps he intended to end the relationship. Perhaps there remained some piece of the story she couldn't yet see. The receipt erased those possibilities. People planning engagements don't prepare to end relationships. They prepare to begin new lives. Grant wasn't struggling between two futures. He had already chosen one. He simply hadn't informed his wife. Marie walked into the bathroom. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her face appeared calm. She almost didn't recognize the woman staring back at her. Only a few weeks earlier she would have cried until sunrise. Now, nothing. Not because she no longer cared. Because certainty had replaced confusion. She finally understood why the tears had stopped. Tears belong to uncertainty, to unanswered questions, to hope that refuses to disappear. She no longer lived in that place. She had answers now. Painful answers. Complete answers. Grant came home the following afternoon, smiling as he carried his overnight bag into the house. I've got good news. Marie looked up from the kitchen. Oh? The client loved the proposal. Looks like the project is moving forward. Marie smiled politely. Congratulations. Grant walked over and kissed her forehead. Thank you. He looked completely relaxed, completely unaware that his carefully constructed double life had already begun collapsing inside the mind of the one person he believed would never stop believing him. That evening, Jessica asked whether everyone could go hiking the following weekend. Grant checked his calendar. I think I can make that work. Jessica smiled. I hope so. Marie watched her daughter carefully. Jessica no longer believed promises. She waited for actions. Grant had not only weakened his marriage, he had quietly changed the way his daughter trusted him. After Jessica went upstairs, Marie stood alone in the kitchen washing the last dinner plate. Water flowed steadily into the sink. The ordinary sound filled the quiet room. She placed the clean plate into the drying rack, turned off the faucet, dried her hands. For the first time since Grant had asked for one night with Chloe, she searched her heart for anger. She found none, only certainty. Her marriage had not ended because of one conversation in the kitchen. It had ended through months of choices made long before that conversation ever happened. Grant simply hadn't realized it yet. The morning after Marie found the jewelry receipt, she woke before her alarm. For several seconds, she lay perfectly still, listening to the quiet rhythm of the house. Jessica's bedroom remained silent. Grant slept beside her without moving. Nothing about the room suggested that their lives stood on the edge of permanent change. Marie slowly sat up and looked toward the window. Sunlight had only begun pushing through the curtains. A new day had arrived. Unlike every morning before it, she no longer wondered what decision she would eventually make. She had already made it. The only thing remaining was making sure every step happened the right way. She quietly dressed for work, prepared breakfast, packed Jessica's lunch, and reviewed the family calendar exactly as she had done for years. Grant walked downstairs carrying his coffee mug. You've been up a while. I couldn't sleep. Everything okay at the hospital? Marie spread butter across a slice of toast. We're preparing for another accreditation review. Grant nodded. I figured work must be keeping you busy. Marie looked at him briefly. It is. The answer wasn't a lie. Her work kept her busy. So did preparing for the life she would soon begin without him. Jessica joined them a few minutes later, carrying a stack of notebooks. I have a biology quiz today. Marie smiled. You studied hard. I know you'll do well. Grant reached across the table and squeezed Jessica's shoulder. You'll do great. Jessica smiled at both of them. For a brief moment, Marie wished life could remain frozen exactly there. Jessica laughing over breakfast. A quiet kitchen. 3 people sharing one table. Then she remembered the engagement ring hidden inside Grant's jacket. The moment passed. After everyone left the house, Marie drove to Naomi Ellison's office before reporting to the hospital. Naomi welcomed her into the same conference room where they had first met. You look different today. Marie took her seat. I finally stopped hoping I was missing part of the story. Naomi nodded. What changed? Marie described the jewelry receipt, the engagement ring, the date, the amount. She explained everything calmly. When she finished, Naomi folded her hands. I know this isn't easy to hear. Marie waited. But you've reached an important point. What point? You've stopped asking whether the facts are real. Now you're asking how to move forward. Marie slowly nodded. I think that's true. Naomi opened a file already waiting on the table. I've prepared preliminary documents. Marie looked down. Property information, financial disclosures, custody paperwork, asset inventories, temporary financial protections. Everything had been organized with the same careful attention Marie admired in her own work. Naomi pointed to several pages. Nothing will be filed until you're ready. Marie appreciated hearing those words. Control still belonged to her. No one would rush her. No one would pressure her. For nearly 2 hours they reviewed every document line by line. Naomi explained how shared property would be evaluated, how retirement accounts were handled, How custody decisions focused on stability rather than punishment. How financial transparency protected everyone involved. Marie asked questions, made notes, requested clarification whenever something remained unclear. She wanted to understand every decision before making it. When the meeting ended, Naomi handed her another folder. "I'd like you to review everything one more time at home." Marie accepted it. "I will." Naomi stood. "One more thing." Marie looked up. "When this begins." Q. Don't announce it emotionally. Simply present the truth. Marie smiled faintly. "I don't think I have enough anger left for anything else." Naomi returned the smile. "That's exactly why you're ready." Leaving the office, Marie felt an unexpected sense of calm. Not because her marriage had ended, because uncertainty finally had. Over the following week, preparation quietly became part of her routine. Nothing dramatic happened. No arguments. No accusations. She simply completed one practical task after another. During lunch breaks, she organized copies of tax records. After work, she reviewed insurance information. She updated personal employment documents, verified retirement account information, confirmed Jessica's education fund remained secure. Each task represented another piece of stability. Every evening she returned home before Grant. The house looked exactly as it always had. Dinner still appeared on the table. Laundry remained folded. Jessica continued preparing for school. Grant noticed nothing unusual. One Wednesday afternoon, while Grant traveled to another supposed client meeting, Marie quietly opened the hallway closet containing several storage containers. Inside rested family photo albums, journals, keepsakes from Jessica's childhood, and personal letters exchanged during the early years of her marriage. She carefully lifted one box onto the floor. Inside lay Jessica's first baby shoes, hospital bracelets from the day she was born, handmade Mother's Day cards covered with crooked handwriting, school drawings, family photographs. Marie smiled as she looked through them, not because she wanted to remember the marriage, because she wanted to preserve Jessica's childhood. She selected only irreplaceable personal items, nothing belonging jointly to the household, nothing intended to create conflict, only memories that could never be replaced if they were accidentally damaged or misplaced during the difficult months ahead. Later that evening, she met Danielle in a grocery store parking lot after work. Danielle stepped out of her car. "You brought everything?" Marie nodded. "Just personal keepsakes." Danielle opened her trunk. "I've already cleared a closet." Together, they carefully transferred several small storage boxes. Neither woman spoke very much. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable. It reflected the seriousness of what they were doing. When the last box had been loaded, Danielle gently closed the trunk. "You've thought through every step." Marie looked down. "I had to." Danielle touched her arm. "I'm proud of you." Marie smiled sadly. "I never imagined my life would look like this." "No," Danielle answered softly, "but you're handling it with dignity." Marie drove home immediately afterward. Grant arrived 20 minutes later carrying takeout for dinner. "I thought we'd give you a break tonight." Marie thanked him. Jessica smiled excitedly. "This is my favorite place." The three of them ate together. Grant laughed at one of Jessica's stories from school. Jessica described preparations for her birthday the following week. Marie listened more than she spoke. As she watched them together, she realized something else. Grant truly believed everything had returned to normal. He mistook peace for forgiveness. He mistook patience for acceptance. He never considered another possibility, that while he had been assuming time would solve everything, Marie had quietly spent every day preparing for the moment when the truth would finally stand between them. Before going to bed that night, she opened the navy folder Naomi had prepared. She carefully added several new documents: Victor Hale's financial analysis, copies of hotel charges, travel comparisons, the condominium lease information, bank statements. Everything fit neatly behind labeled dividers. Marie closed the folder, ran her hand gently across the cover. This wasn't a weapon. It wasn't revenge. It was the complete record of decisions Grant had already made long before asking for one night with Chloe. Soon, he would finally have to read the story his own choices had written. Jessica counted down the days to her birthday with the excitement only a 14-year-old could have. She wasn't asking for an expensive vacation. She didn't want the newest phone. She had one simple request. "I just want everybody together." She mentioned it one evening, while helping Marie frost cupcakes for a bake sale. No work, no meetings, no phones. She smiled, hopefully. Just one dinner. Marie looked at her daughter for several seconds before answering. "I think that's a wonderful idea." Jessica turned toward her. "You'll both come?" "I'll be there." Jessica laughed. "I know you will." She lowered the bowl and looked toward the living room, where Grant was finishing another business call. "I hope Dad can keep this one." Marie followed her daughter's eyes. "So do I." The birthday dinner was scheduled for the following Saturday evening at Jessica's favorite family restaurant, overlooking a small lake outside Charlotte. The restaurant wasn't luxurious. That was exactly why Jessica loved it. She had celebrated birthdays there since elementary school. The staff knew her favorite dessert. The outdoor patio overlooked calm water, where ducks drifted slowly across the surface. For Jessica, it had become part of growing up. 3 days before the dinner, Grant mentioned another overnight business trip. "I'll be back Friday." Jessica immediately looked concerned. "You'll still be there Saturday?" Grant smiled confidently. "Of course. I wouldn't miss your birthday." Jessica relaxed. "Promise?" "I promise." Marie quietly folded laundry while listening to the conversation. Grant sounded sincere. Perhaps he even believed himself. But sincerity no longer carried the same meaning it once had. Not after months of carefully hidden choices. Saturday finally arrived. Marie woke earlier than usual. She made breakfast exactly as she always had. Jessica came downstairs smiling. "I can't believe I'm 14. Marie hugged her tightly. "Happy birthday." Jessica smiled. "Thanks, Mom." Grant appeared a few minutes later, carrying a neatly wrapped gift. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." Jessica hugged him. "I thought you weren't getting back until today." "I changed my schedule." Jessica looked genuinely happy. For several hours, the house felt almost normal again. Jessica opened gifts. Friends called with birthday wishes. Marie baked Jessica's favorite chocolate cake to enjoy after returning from the restaurant. Grant even helped decorate the dining room. Watching him tape birthday streamers across one wall, Marie felt an unexpected sadness. Not because she questioned her decision, because she could still see the man she once believed he truly was. Some memories refused to disappear simply because the truth had changed. Late that afternoon, everyone dressed for dinner. Jessica chose a blue dress Marie had helped her pick several weeks earlier. Grant complimented her immediately. "You look beautiful." Jessica laughed. "I was hoping you'd say that." Marie smiled as she watched them. She wanted Jessica to remember this birthday for the right reasons. Not because it became the night her parents argued. That would never happen. Before leaving the house, Marie quietly picked up the navy folder resting inside the home office. She looked at it for several seconds. Every document inside had been checked repeatedly. Nothing depended on assumptions. Nothing depended on opinions. Only records, dates, statements, financial reports, messages, calendars, receipts, everything supported by evidence. She placed the folder inside her tote bag, closed the zipper, walked toward the front door. The drive to the restaurant lasted nearly 30 minutes. Jessica spent most of it talking about school and her plans for high school the following year. Grant listened more carefully than he had in months. He laughed, asked questions, even suggested taking another family hiking trip before summer ended. Jessica's face brightened immediately. "Really?" Grant smiled. "Absolutely." Marie kept her eyes on the road. She said nothing. Promises had become very easy for Grant. Keeping them had become much harder. The restaurant staff greeted Jessica with smiles the moment they walked inside. "Happy birthday." Jessica laughed happily. They remembered. They always do. The hostess guided them toward a table overlooking the lake. Sunlight reflected gently across the water. Families celebrated birthdays at nearby tables. Children laughed. Soft music played through overhead speakers. Everything about the evening felt peaceful. Exactly as Marie had hoped. Dinner began with ordinary conversation. Jessica described her science fair project. Grant spoke about work. Marie shared a funny story involving one of the hospital volunteers. The waitress brought Jessica her favorite lemonade. Another employee stopped by to wish her a happy birthday. Jessica smiled almost constantly. Marie silently thanked herself for waiting until this evening. Her daughter deserved several hours of uncomplicated happiness before life changed. The main course arrived. Jessica talked excitedly about learning to drive in another year. Grant joked that he wasn't emotionally prepared. Jessica laughed so hard she nearly dropped her fork. Marie found herself laughing too. For just a few moments, they looked exactly like the family everyone believed they were. Eventually, the waitress approached again. "Would you like me to bring the birthday cake now?" Jessica smiled. "Can you wait just a couple of minutes? I want to wash my hands first." "Of course." Jessica stood. "I'll be right back." She walked toward the hallway leading to the restrooms. Marie watched until her daughter disappeared around the corner. The table became quiet. Grant reached for his glass of water. Marie slowly opened her tote bag beneath the table. Her movements remained calm, deliberate. She removed the navy folder. Grant noticed it immediately. "What's that?" Marie gently placed it in front of him. "I need you to look through it." He smiled uncertainly. "What is it?" "You'll understand." Grant still looked puzzled. He opened the folder. The first page rested neatly on top. A petition for divorce. His smile disappeared instantly. He looked back at Marie. Neither of them spoke. She nodded once. "Keep reading." Grant slowly turned another page. Financial summaries, bank statements, hotel receipts, travel records. His expression changed again. "What is this?" Marie answered quietly. "The truth." Grant continued turning pages. Restaurant charges, credit card transactions, the condominium lease, Victor Hale's financial analysis, comparisons between business travel and actual spending. Every document arranged chronologically, every section labeled, every date verified. Grant's breathing became noticeably slower. His hands stopped moving for a moment before continuing. Another section appeared. Printed message records, selected conversations, dates, times. The sentence claiming his marriage had been over for years. The promise that everything would soon be settled. Grant looked up. His face had completely changed. "This isn't." He stopped speaking. Marie remained calm. "Keep reading." The next divider separated another section. Parenting records, school conferences, medical appointments, soccer schedules, piano recitals, homework meetings, attendance logs, emails. Every responsibility carefully documented, not opinions, records. Grant turned pages more quickly now. His confidence disappeared with each document. Finally, he reached the last section. Naomi's completed legal paperwork, financial disclosures, property documents, everything ready, everything organized, everything finished. Grant slowly closed the folder. For several long seconds, he simply stared at the cover. The restaurant around them continued normally. Servers carried food. Families laughed. Glasses clinked softly. No one noticed that one marriage had just ended at a quiet table beside the lake. Grant finally looked across at Marie. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "How long have you known?" Grant never took his eyes off the navy folder. His fingers rested on the cover, as though closing it might somehow erase everything inside. Finally, he spoke again. "How long have you known?" Marie answered without hesitation. "Long enough to stop asking questions." Grant swallowed. "You've been gathering all of this?" "Yes." "For how long?" "Since the night you asked me to spend one night with Chloe." He lowered his head. "I knew something changed that night." Marie nodded. "It did." Grant looked back at the folder. You didn't say anything. I listened. You acted like everything was normal. Marie met his eyes. I needed the truth. Grant slowly shook his head. You should have talked to me. Marie remained composed. I did. You just didn't realize that conversation had already ended. He stared at her, unable to answer. His eyes moved back to the documents. The hotel charges, the bank statements, the condominium lease, the parenting records. Every page carried dates. Every page connected to another. There wasn't a single accusation written anywhere. Only evidence. Grant looked exhausted. You followed me? No. You hired someone? No. Then how? Marie interrupted gently. You left enough behind. Grant looked confused. What do you mean? You believed I would never look. You believed I would never question your explanations. You believed my trust meant I would stop paying attention. Grant closed his eyes. I never wanted this. Marie answered quietly. But you chose it. He immediately looked back at her. I made mistakes. She shook her head. No. Mistakes happen once. You made decisions. Repeatedly. Grant leaned forward. I know how that sounds. I don't think you do. His shoulders dropped. I never stopped caring about you. Marie listened. She didn't interrupt. Grant continued. I got caught up. I thought I could fix everything before anyone got hurt. Marie spoke for the first time in several moments. You rented another home. You spent our money. You told another woman our marriage had already ended. You bought an engagement ring. She paused. At what point exactly were you planning to fix it? Grant opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The silence answered the question far better than any explanation could. After several seconds, he quietly asked, You found the ring? Yes. I was going to tell you. Marie looked at him steadily. When? He looked away. I don't know. You already knew. Grant rubbed both hands across his face. I panicked. You've had 7 months. That's not panic. He lowered his voice. I never meant to hurt Jessica. Marie nodded. I believe that. Grant looked surprised. You do? Yes. I also believe you hurt her anyway. His expression tightened. I love my daughter. I know. Then why are you saying that? Marie slowly opened the final section of the folder. She removed several pages. School attendance records, parent-teacher conference confirmations, soccer schedules, medical appointments. She gently placed them in front of him. Read those. Grant looked down. Every page listed dates. Every page recorded attendance. Every page showed the same pattern. Marie, Marie, Marie. Occasionally, Grant. He flipped through several more pages. Teacher emails, appointment confirmations, volunteer records, Jessica's science competition, piano recital, soccer tournament. Every event documented. Every absence supported. Grant stopped turning pages. His voice became almost inaudible. I didn't realize. Marie answered softly. I know. I thought I was doing enough. You were doing what fit around everything else. Grant stared at the paperwork. I never wanted Jessica to feel ignored. Marie nodded again. I believe you. But intentions don't become memories. Presence does. Grant remained silent. The words settled heavily between them. For the first time that evening, his attention shifted away from Chloe, away from the affair, away from the divorce. He began looking at something much larger, the years he couldn't relive, the games he had missed, the conversations he had postponed, the promises that slowly became ordinary disappointments. Jessica had never complained. She had simply learned to expect less. That realization hit him harder than every financial record inside the folder. Grant leaned back in his chair. I've ruined everything. Marie didn't answer immediately. She looked toward the hallway leading to the restrooms. Jessica would return any minute. There wasn't much time left. Grant reached across the table. His hand stopped halfway. Please. Marie looked at him. I'll end it. I'll leave the condominium. I'll tell Chloe everything. I'll quit my job if I have to. I'll do whatever you ask. His voice cracked. Please don't end our marriage. Marie watched him carefully. Months earlier, those words would have broken her heart. Now they simply sounded late. You know what the hardest part was? Grant waited. It wasn't reading the messages. It wasn't finding the financial records. It wasn't even discovering the ring. She paused. The hardest part was realizing I had spent years trying to become enough for someone who had already stopped valuing what he had. Grant shook his head immediately. That's not true. Marie looked directly into his eyes. It is. I spent years making excuses for your absences. I defended you when people asked why you couldn't come. I told Jessica work was important. I protected your reputation every time you weren't there. Grant lowered his head. I know, you know now. She continued calmly. I kept believing that if I worked harder, organized, more, supported you better, our marriage would become stronger. She gave a faint, sad smile. I finally realized something. Grant whispered, What? I was trying to convince someone to value me. She slowly shook her head. I don't have to do that anymore. Grant covered his face with both hands. I'm sorry. I know those words can't fix this. I know, but I am. Marie believed him. She truly did. His regret sounded genuine. The problem wasn't whether he regretted everything. The problem was that regret arrived only after the truth left him with nowhere else to stand. Footsteps approached from the hallway. Jessica returned, carrying a small smile. They're bringing the cake. Grant quickly lowered his hands. He wiped his eyes before Jessica reached the table. She looked from one parent to the other. Everything okay? Marie smiled warmly. We're fine. Jessica looked uncertain. You both seem quiet. Grant forced a smile. Just thinking about how quickly you're growing up. Jessica laughed. I'll always be your little girl. Grant looked at her. For several seconds, he couldn't speak. Finally, he managed a quiet reply. I hope so. The restaurant staff appeared carrying Jessica's birthday cake. Candles glowed softly above the chocolate frosting. Everyone around the table began singing. Jessica closed her eyes before making her wish. Marie watched her daughter instead of the candles. Grant watched Jessica too. Only this time, he wasn't seeing a birthday. He was seeing everything he had almost thrown away. When Jessica blew out the candles, applause spread across the dining room. She smiled brightly. For her, the evening still belonged to family. For Grant, the celebration marked something entirely different. He had arrived believing he still had time to repair every lie with another explanation. Instead, he discovered that while he had been preparing excuses, Marie had quietly prepared the truth. As the waitress began cutting slices of cake, Grant looked once more at the navy folder resting beside his plate. For the first time in his career, for the first time in his marriage, he understood that no amount of confidence, persuasion, or negotiation could overcome documented truth. And as he looked across the table at Marie, another realization settled heavily inside him. He had not only lost the woman who had quietly held his life together, he had also destroyed the trust and reputation that had once defined the man he believed himself to be. Jessica's birthday ended with hugs, leftover cake packed into small boxes, and smiles offered for her sake. The drive home was unusually quiet. Jessica sat in the back seat, scrolling through photographs she had taken during dinner. I think this one's my favorite, she said, holding her phone forward. The picture showed all three of them smiling around the birthday cake. Grant looked at the image in the rearview mirror. Send that to me. I will. Jessica smiled. I want to frame it. Marie kept both hands on the steering wheel. She glanced briefly at the photograph before returning her attention to the road. It captured exactly what everyone else believed they had seen. A happy family. Only two people inside that picture knew the marriage had already ended. When they reached home, Jessica carried her presents upstairs. "I'm going to call my friends." "Don't stay up too late," Marie reminded her. "I won't." Grant stood near the front door after Jessica disappeared. He looked toward Marie. "Can we talk?" She answered calmly. "Tomorrow. Please. Our daughter deserves one birthday that ends peacefully." Grant lowered his eyes. "You're right." Marie walked upstairs without another word. That night, Grant remained awake much longer than usual. He replayed every page inside the Navy folder. The bank statements, the messages, the condominium lease, the parenting records. He had always believed he could explain difficult situations if he had enough time. For the first time in his life, he faced something explanation could not erase. Facts remained facts. The following Monday, Grant arrived at work earlier than anyone else. He hoped losing himself in business would quiet everything else. Instead, every empty moment brought Marie's words back to him. "I stopped trying to convince someone to value me." He opened his laptop. 30 new emails waited. Client requests, lease revisions, meeting schedules. He tried reading the first message 3 different times. None of the words stayed in his mind. His phone vibrated. "Marie." For one brief second, hope returned. He opened the message immediately. It contained only one sentence. "Naomi Ellison will contact you regarding the legal filings." Nothing else. No anger. No accusation. No invitation to argue. Grant stared at the screen for several minutes. The legal process had already begun. Not because Marie wanted revenge, because she had prepared long before handing him the folder. Late that afternoon, Grant received another call. This time from Naomi's office. The receptionist politely confirmed that formal documents had already been filed. Every required financial disclosure had been completed. Deadlines had been met. Future communication regarding legal matters would proceed through the proper process. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. When it ended, Grant remained seated at his desk. Months. Marie had quietly prepared for months, while he believed she was simply learning to accept what he had done. He finally understood why she had remained so calm. She wasn't waiting for answers. She had already found them. Meanwhile, Marie approached each day exactly as she always had. She arrived early at the hospital. She attended leadership meetings. She solved staffing shortages. She encouraged younger administrators facing difficult decisions. No one outside her closest circle noticed any change. She refused to let personal pain affect the people who depended on her professionally. After work, she returned home to Jessica. Homework still needed checking. Dinner still needed cooking. Life continued. Only now, every decision reflected a future that no longer included Grant as her husband. Several days later, Victor Hale completed the final version of his financial analysis. Marie met him briefly after work. Victor placed a thick report across the conference table. "I reviewed every available account." Marie looked down at the neatly organized pages. "What did you find?" Victor adjusted his glasses. "The overall pattern is consistent." He opened the report. Shared marital funds paid for recurring condominium expenses. He turned another page. Travel reimbursements submitted through Grant's employer don't consistently match verified business activity. Another page. Restaurant charges coincide with dates reflected in other records. Marie listened without interrupting. Victor continued. Each individual transaction might appear ordinary, but when viewed together, he gently tapped the report. They establish a very clear financial history. Marie nodded slowly. Could any of this reasonably be disputed? Victor answered honestly. The records speak for themselves. She thanked him before leaving. Walking back toward her car, Marie felt no satisfaction. She had hoped, at every stage, that something would explain away the inconsistencies. Instead, every professional review confirmed exactly what she had already discovered herself. Across town, Grant struggled through another difficult week. His concentration disappeared. Co-workers noticed. One colleague stopped outside his office. "You seem distracted. Everything okay?" Grant forced a smile. "Just dealing with some family matters." The colleague nodded. "I hope everything works out." "So do I." Grant watched the office door close. For years, work had been the place where he felt most confident. Now even that certainty had begun slipping away. Near the end of the week, his company announced a routine internal review of travel reimbursement records connected to several regional projects. Normally, Grant would have paid little attention. This time, his stomach tightened immediately. He remembered every hotel, every expense report, every reimbursement connected to weekends spent with Chloe instead of clients. The review wasn't targeting him personally. It covered the entire regional division. Still, Grant suddenly realized how many financial decisions he'd made, assuming no one would ever compare dates closely enough. At home, another conversation quietly unfolded. Jessica sat beside Marie at the kitchen table finishing homework. "Mom?" "Yes?" "Is everything changing?" Marie looked carefully at her daughter. "What makes you ask?" Jessica shrugged. "You and Dad are both trying really hard to act normal." Marie remained silent. Jessica looked down at her notebook. "I don't know what's happening, but I know something is." Marie reached across the table and gently held Jessica's hand. "There are some grown-up conversations your father and I have to finish." Jessica nodded. "Are you both still my parents?" Marie smiled warmly. "Always. No matter what changes." "That will never change." Jessica squeezed her mother's hand. "Okay." Marie watched her daughter return to her homework. Protecting Jessica remained the center of every decision she made. Not winning, not proving Grant wrong, giving her daughter the most stable future possible. The following afternoon, Grant finally drove to the condominium. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. For months, he had imagined it as the beginning of another chapter. Now it felt strangely unfamiliar. The furniture remained exactly where he had left it. The kitchen stood perfectly clean. The engagement ring still rested inside the bedroom dresser. Nothing had changed. Except him. He looked around the apartment in complete silence. For the first time, he saw it through Marie's eyes. Every chair, every payment, every decoration, every month of rent, all purchased while another home waited across town. A home where Marie packed lunches before sunrise, helped Jessica with homework, paid bills, held their family together. Grant slowly sat down on the edge of the sofa. He finally understood something he had refused to admit for months. He hadn't lost his marriage because Marie discovered the truth. He lost it because he had spent months building a second life while assuming the first one would always be there waiting for him. The weeks that followed settled into a routine neither Marie nor Grant had imagined when they first stood together exchanging wedding vows 12 years earlier. There were no dramatic confrontations, no arguments shouted across the house, no slammed doors. The quiet became far more difficult than either of them expected. Grant moved carefully through each day, hoping for another opportunity to change Marie's mind. Marie moved through each day, completing one responsibility after another, refusing to allow emotion to interfere with the decisions she had already made. Jessica remained the center of every choice. The legal process continued exactly as Naomi had explained. Each required document arrived on schedule. Financial disclosures were exchanged. Property records were reviewed. Retirement accounts were evaluated. Every step followed established procedures. Nothing depended on accusations. Everything depended on documentation. Grant quickly realized something that had never crossed his mind before. Marie hadn't prepared only emotionally. She had prepared practically. Every important record had already been organized. Every financial statement had been copied. Every insurance document had been secured. Every question received a clear answer supported by records. There were no surprises waiting for either attorney. Marie had spent years managing complicated hospital systems. Compared to coordinating hundreds of employees, organizing paperwork for her own future had become another responsibility she handled with the same discipline. Several weeks later, the first formal mediation session took place. Grant arrived carrying a folder that looked almost empty beside Marie's carefully organized files. He looked across the table. "You really planned everything." Marie answered honestly. "I planned Because I had to. You never gave me a chance. She looked at him quietly. I gave you 12 years. Grant lowered his eyes. He knew arguing would accomplish nothing. The discussion moved toward practical matters. The family home, financial accounts, Jessica's school schedule, medical insurance, future parenting arrangements. Marie never asked that Jessica be separated from her father. She never questioned whether Grant loved his daughter. Instead, she focused on stability. Jessica had attended the same school for years. Her friends lived nearby. Her piano instructor worked only 15 minutes from the house. Her soccer team practiced every Wednesday and Saturday. Keeping those routines intact mattered more than anything else. Grant listened carefully. For the first time since the process began, he realized Marie wasn't trying to win. She was trying to protect the life Jessica already knew. That realization stayed with him long after the meeting ended. Several weeks later, the court approved temporary arrangements while the remaining paperwork continued. Jessica would continue living primarily in the family home with Marie. Grant would have regular parenting time built around Jessica's school schedule. Marie accepted the decision quietly. Grant accepted it too. Driving home afterward, he understood why the arrangement made sense. Marie had always managed the daily rhythm of Jessica's life. Morning routines, homework, doctor appointments, school communication, practice schedules. Nothing in the court's decision surprised him. The evidence simply reflected the life they had already been living. Back at the house, another reality slowly emerged. Grant had rented a townhouse nearby while the legal process continued. For the first time in his adult life, every ordinary responsibility belonged entirely to him. The first morning alone began badly. He overslept, forgot to buy coffee, opened the refrigerator, and realized he had almost nothing prepared for breakfast. He drove to work hungry after grabbing a packaged snack from a gas station. That evening, he stood inside a grocery store, holding a shopping basket. He stared at dozens of shelves, longer than necessary. Which laundry detergent had Marie always bought? How much food lasted 1 week? How many cleaning supplies did a house actually require? Questions he had never needed to answer suddenly became part of everyday life. He filled the basket slowly. Bread, eggs, milk, fruit, chicken, rice, vegetables, cleaning products, paper towels. Nothing looked complicated. Yet the trip took almost an hour. As he unloaded groceries at home, he found himself remembering how effortlessly those same tasks had always happened before. He never wondered who noticed the refrigerator running low. He never thought about who replaced household supplies before they disappeared. He simply opened a cabinet and expected everything to be there. For years, Marie had quietly removed every inconvenience before it ever reached him. Only now did he understand how much thought ordinary life actually required. The following Saturday marked Jessica's first overnight visit since the temporary parenting schedule began. Grant arrived 20 minutes early. Jessica stepped outside carrying a small overnight bag. Marie smiled. Everything you need is inside. Jessica hugged her mother. I'll see you tomorrow. Have fun. Grant loaded the bag into his car. During the drive, Jessica looked around curiously. I've never been here before. Grant smiled. I know. I tried to make it comfortable. Jessica walked through the townhouse slowly. Her bedroom had been prepared carefully. Fresh bedding, books she enjoyed reading, a small desk for homework. Photos of the three of them together still stood on the dresser. Jessica smiled politely. It's nice. Grant looked relieved. I'm glad. The afternoon passed comfortably enough. They ordered pizza, watched a movie, worked on a science assignment together. Grant genuinely enjoyed every minute. Late that evening, Jessica stood in the kitchen while he searched through several cabinets. What are you looking for? Pancake mix. Jessica looked puzzled. I thought you said we were making pancakes tomorrow. We are. Grant searched another shelf. He stopped. I forgot to buy it. Jessica smiled kindly. It's okay. We can make eggs. Grant laughed awkwardly. I guess we can. Jessica shrugged. Mom always checks the pantry before grocery shopping. The words were innocent. Jessica wasn't criticizing him. She was simply describing something she had always seen. Grant smiled faintly. I should probably start doing that. The next morning, he almost forgot Jessica's soccer uniform before leaving for her game. Halfway to the field, Jessica quietly asked, Dad? Yes? My jersey. Grant immediately looked toward the back seat. It wasn't there. He sighed. We'll have to turn around. Jessica leaned back quietly. No problem. Grant drove home in silence. The round trip made them 20 minutes late. Jessica joined the second half of practice instead of the beginning. While waiting on the sidelines, Grant watched Marie speaking with another parent several rows away. She noticed Jessica arrive late. Their eyes met briefly. Marie didn't criticize him. She didn't ask questions. She simply smiled at Jessica before returning her attention to the game. That quiet kindness somehow made him feel even worse. After practice ended, Jessica climbed into his car. It's okay, Dad. Grant looked at her. No, it isn't. Jessica smiled gently. You'll remember next time. Grant nodded slowly. I will. Driving home, he finally understood something that had never occurred to him during all those years of marriage. Marie hadn't simply managed their household. She had protected everyone inside it from hundreds of small problems they never realized existed. Those problems hadn't disappeared. They had simply reached him now that she was no longer quietly carrying them alone. For the first time in 12 years, Grant wasn't just missing his wife. He was beginning to understand everything she had done without ever asking to be noticed. Autumn settled over Charlotte with cooler mornings, bright afternoons, and neighborhoods painted in shades of gold and deep red. Nearly 8 months had passed since Jessica's birthday dinner. Life no longer felt divided between before and after. It had simply become life again. Different, quieter, healthier. The divorce had been finalized months earlier. Every financial matter had been resolved according to the documentation Marie had prepared and the legal process Naomi had carefully guided. The family home remained with Marie and Jessica. Jessica continued attending the same school, practicing with the same soccer team, and taking lessons from the same piano instructor. Very little in her daily routine changed. Marie had fought for that consistency from the very beginning. Not because routine solved everything. Because children heal more easily when the foundation beneath them remains steady. Every morning, Marie still woke before sunrise. Some habits never disappeared. Coffee brewed in the kitchen. Jessica's lunch waited inside the refrigerator. The family calendar still hung inside the pantry. Only now, fewer names competed for her attention. The house felt peaceful, not empty, peaceful. There was a difference. Jessica noticed it before anyone else. One Saturday morning, she wandered into the kitchen wearing oversized pajamas. You smile more now. Marie looked up from the stove. Do I? Jessica nodded while reaching for a glass of orange juice. You used to look tired all the time. Marie thought about that for a moment. I probably was. Jessica smiled. You laugh more too. Marie laughed softly. I guess you're right. Jessica walked over and hugged her. I'm glad. Marie wrapped her arms around her daughter. So am I. Across town, Grant's mornings looked very different. His townhouse had slowly become organized. Not because life had become easier. Because he had finally learned the routines Marie had quietly managed for years. Saturday mornings meant grocery shopping before crowds arrived. Sunday evenings meant preparing lunches before another school week. Laundry happened every Wednesday and Saturday. Jessica's soccer schedule stayed taped to the refrigerator. Doctor appointments went into his calendar immediately. School emails received replies before deadlines passed. The first few months had been difficult. He forgot things, arrived late, bought groceries they didn't need while forgetting the ones they did. Jessica never complained. She simply helped when she could. Gradually, Grant improved, not because someone reminded him, because he finally understood what responsibility actually looked like. One Friday afternoon, Jessica arrived for another weekend visit carrying a science project. Dad? Yes? Can you help me build this? Grant looked over the instructions. I've never made one before. Jessica smiled. We'll figure it out. For 3 hours, they worked together at the kitchen table. Measurements, paint, cardboard, tiny mistakes followed by careful corrections. When they finally finished, Jessica stepped back proudly. We did it. Grant smiled. No. You did it. Jessica shook her head. We both did. Grant looked at his daughter. He realized moments like this had become possible only after he stopped believing fatherhood could fit around everything else. Now, it came first. The following Monday, Marie stood before a group of newly promoted hospital supervisors during a leadership development seminar. Hospital administrators from several departments filled the conference room. Marie walked toward the front with a small notebook in her hand. I'd like to begin with one question. Everyone looked toward her. What makes a strong leader? Several hands rose. Communication, experience, decision-making, accountability. Marie nodded after each answer. All important. She smiled. But here's something we rarely discuss. The best leaders often perform their most important work without anyone noticing. The room became quiet. She continued. When systems function well, people assume they happen naturally. They don't. They happen because someone consistently pays attention to details others never see. Several supervisors nodded thoughtfully. Marie smiled. If your team only notices your work when something goes wrong, you're probably doing many things exactly right. The room filled with quiet laughter. Marie continued the session. She spoke about preparation, trust, consistency, quiet leadership. She never mentioned her marriage. She didn't need to. The lessons she shared had become part of who she was. Several younger supervisors remained afterward, asking questions about balancing work and family. Marie answered each one patiently. Before leaving, one young administrator paused beside the door. I hope I become the kind of leader you are. Marie smiled warmly. I hope you become even better. Later that evening, Danielle stopped by the house, carrying coffee. Jessica had gone to a friend's birthday party. The two women sat on the back porch, watching the sunset. Danielle looked toward Marie. You look different. Marie laughed. I've heard that before. This time I mean it. You look lighter. Marie looked across the backyard. I stopped carrying things that never belonged to me. Danielle smiled. I think that's exactly what happened. They sat quietly for several moments. Finally, Danielle asked, Any regrets? Marie thought carefully before answering. I regret that Jessica had to experience any of it. She paused. But leaving? She gently shook her head. No. I regret staying silent about my own needs for so many years. Across town, Grant sat alone after Jessica had returned home. The townhouse had become clean, organized, comfortable. He had learned how to cook several of Jessica's favorite meals. He never forgot grocery lists anymore. He arrived early for every soccer game. He attended every parent-teacher conference, every piano recital, every doctor's appointment, not because someone required it, because he finally understood those ordinary moments became the memories children carried into adulthood. Jessica noticed the difference. One evening after dinner, she smiled at him. You've been to everything lately. Grant looked up. I'm trying. Jessica nodded. I know. Those two words meant more to him than any professional award he had ever received. He couldn't change the past, but he could refuse to repeat it. One afternoon, months later, Grant passed the small jewelry store where he had once purchased the engagement ring. He slowed briefly at the traffic light. For a moment, he remembered the confidence with which he had walked inside. He believed he controlled every outcome. He believed he could keep every promise to every person. He believed Marie would always remain where he had left her. The light turned green. Grant continued driving. He never looked back. Some lessons arrived only after the opportunity to choose differently had disappeared forever. On a quiet Sunday evening, Marie and Jessica finished planting flowers in the front yard. Jessica brushed dirt from her gardening gloves. They look nice. Marie stepped back beside her. They'll be even prettier in a few weeks. Jessica smiled. I like our house. So do I. Jessica slipped her hand into her mother's. We're going to be okay. Marie looked at her daughter. We already are. The evening breeze moved gently through the trees lining their street. Neighbors waved while walking their dogs. Children laughed farther down the sidewalk. Life continued exactly as it always had. Ordinary, steady, beautiful in the quiet moments people often overlooked. Marie understood something she wished she had learned years earlier. The strongest relationships aren't sustained by dramatic promises. They're sustained by thousands of ordinary choices made with honesty, gratitude, respect, and consistency. Grant eventually became the dependable father Jessica deserved. He worked every day to rebuild that relationship. Jessica saw the effort. She appreciated it. But trust returns slowly. Some things heal. Some things remain permanent reminders of choices that can never be undone. Marie never celebrated the end of her marriage. She celebrated finding peace without sacrificing her dignity. She never wished Grant failure. She simply stopped making his happiness her responsibility, because she finally understood a truth many people discover far too late. The greatest losses rarely happen during one dramatic moment. They happen through countless ordinary choices that slowly wear away trust, appreciation, respect, and love. When someone who quietly carried your life with loyalty finally walks away with dignity, the years taken for granted can never be returned. Thank you for spending your time with James, Experience Stories. If this story meant something to you, consider subscribing, sharing it with someone who might need its message, and joining us again for more stories about family, resilience, difficult choices, and the lessons that shape our lives. Until next time, thank you for watching.